Purple Daily, meat and potatoes. Not just a deep dive, it's the deepest dive into Minnesota Vikings football.
Deep a dive as you could possibly go. Of course, being Thanksgiving week, it's perfectly timed that meat and potatoes. We're going to dive into football and Vikings. It's Judd, it's Forno, AJ. But before we do that, speaking of food, I want to talk to you about one of the proud sponsors of Purple Daily Meat and Potatoes, and that is our friends, very fittingly, at Butcher and the Boar in the North Loop, a gathering space for Southern-style hospitality. And I want to tell you about what goes on every Thursday night at Butcher and the Boar. It is prime rib night. That means a wedge salad. That means lobster mac and cheese, loaded baked potato, and an ice cream sundae, a meal fit for one or two. It's that big, served until it is sold out each Thursday night. Absolutely fantastic. Butcher and the Boar, a great place to gather for family, business gatherings as well. Again, in the North Loop in Minneapolis. Check it out. All right, Forno, let's get right to it. So one of the most interesting things that came from the Vikings overtime win against the Bears on Sunday, it's been talked about a ton. Kevin O'Connell fielded a bunch of questions about it, both after the game and then more importantly at his Monday press conference. That is the non-statistical impact that Justin Jefferson had, 2 catches for 27 yards, but in regulation, 1 catch for 7 yards. So if you just looked at the box score, you're like, oh man, what happened? If you watched the game told a very different story about what Justin Jefferson impact was on Sunday.
Oh my goodness. Justin Jefferson was phenomenal on Sunday. And it's like one of the tough parts about like the national media, and Judd, I think you may agree with this, is it's incredibly hard to completely follow 32 teams. I'm lucky enough where I have a basement with 3 big screen TVs and I watch 7 games a week, not including Monday and Thursday. I watch 9 games a week because I have 3 games on in each time slot. Even with that, it's hard for me to pay attention to multiple games at a time with an in-depth focus because, well, 1, I'm writing about the Vikings, and 2, when I do my post-game stuff like you guys do, I usually miss at least the first quarter of the 3 o'clock games. Yep. So you're missing a lot of context. You just can't do it. Like, there are some people, shout out to my good friend JP Acosta of SB Nation, he grinds all the all-22 on Monday and Tuesday. That's all he does. So he's got a good sense of what every team is. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has that kind of time and ability to be able to do those things. So some people look at the box scores and be like, oh, Justin Jefferson didn't have a great game. He was the game. He was arguably the most pivotal part of why the Vikings ended up winning because of the gravity that he draws. I think about like the solar system. He's Jupiter. Like Jupiter has like 30 some moons. Like he keeps drawing things in. And when he draws things in, that opens things up for everybody else. And one of the reasons why I've talked about why I think wide receiver 3 is a little bit more important than maybe it is for other teams. When Jefferson gets shut down, you have to go to Addison and Hockenson. And what happens if they have the dudes to be able to man up? What happens if you go up against a team like, say, the Buccaneers, where they love to play man coverage and they double Jefferson, and then you have Antoine Winfield Jr. on Hockenson? I know that name is a sore spot for some Vikings fans, but let's move on past that. If you have a guy who can man up with Hockenson, then basically you have Addison, who you have to rely on to win those one-on-one coverages. And if he's having an off day, all of a sudden you're doomed. Like, there's not a ton. I don't trust Jalen Naylor. He has not shown me in these last few weeks I can trust him moving forward. So that's why having a lot of guys around Jefferson is so important, because when he draws that gravity and he's going to have a box score that's going to be less than ideal, you have to have these other guys step up and become major factors in the offense, which they have. Addison had a career game. Like, what is more synonymous to Jordan Addison than a deep post? He's phenomenal with the deep post. Like, he scored his first 2 touchdowns as a rookie in that. He got one against the 49ers on that Monday Night Football game. He scored on one earlier this year. And they keep finding him in these deep posts. And I don't care if he's built like a podcaster. That dude has grown man strength in that 176-pound frame. It's impressive. They keep going to him, and he keeps delivering. That's why you invest a first-round pick in Addison. And having Jefferson with those guys makes it so incredibly hard to defend. Now you have Darnold, where I didn't buy into the fact where he was forcing the ball to Jefferson, because if Jefferson's half open, he's open. Like, This isn't college where you have to throw to guys who are considered wide ass open all the time because spacing is different, rules are different. And if you have a guy that's that elite, you got to get him the football and you have to be able to trust that he's going to make some of those difficult catches in tough situations. So I never bought into that narrative. But you could tell Darnold is getting more and more comfortable throwing to other guys. And that has been the key to his success the last 2 weeks. Go ahead, AJ.
So what would you say to the people out there that I've seen in kind of the football universe that are saying like, oh, they're not treating Justin Jefferson the way that they need to. You have the best wide receiver in football. You have to get him the ball more. I think you could argue that getting him the ball more on Sunday takes away from the productivity of TJ Hawkinson, of Jordan Addison, and that could actually maybe hurt the offense, saying they're triple covering him. You can't just force it to him. But for the people out there that are adamant saying you have to get the best wide receiver in football the ball more, what do you say to them, Tyler?
Do you want Sam Darnold to throw more interceptions? I say that honestly because when you watch the game, look, one thing you have to remember about the Chicago Bears, they have an elite cornerback. Jalen Johnson is an all-pro player. He can do a lot of things in man coverage against Jefferson. He's not going to win consistently. He's going to win enough. And having a guy that can do that, like think of Deion Sanders in his prime. Think of Charles Woodson, Champ Bailey. We're talking about a guy in Jalen Johnson who can man up in a similar-ish way to those guys in years past where you're like, I got this shutdown corner. I don't think that really exists in today's NFL, but I think Johnson's one of the closest ones to it. One of the reasons why shutdown corners really don't exist anymore is because of the rules in the passing game. Corners just aren't allowed to do much. But he did such a good job of staying with Jefferson, being in his hip pocket, staying physical, being able to get his hand in throwing lanes. Those things are incredibly hard to do against somebody like Jefferson who understands how to use spacing, who understands how to use body positioning and leverage to his advantage to even gain an extra 6 to 12 inches of separation, which can be the difference between a catch and an incompletion. So when you have a guy who can do some of those things, it's okay to not force him the football. They still tried to get him the ball. I think he had, 6 or 7 targets? That's not absurd considering when you watch the All-22 and you see how Johnson is just blanketing him because he knows he has help over the top. It's a lot easier to be physical with a guy when you have help. Remember Jair Alexander in that awful cleat game at Lambeau Field a couple years ago where Alexander did the gritty right over top of him? He had safety help all day. So guess what? When you have that safety help, you can be physical at the line of scrimmage and punch him in the mouth and not have to worry if he gets behind you because you have somebody to protect you. They did a lot of that with Johnson, and that's not an insult to Johnson. That's a compliment to Jefferson. So when you have those instances, you have to be willing to adapt your game plan. You have to be willing to adapt how you're attacking this defense because that is how you win football games. And at the end of the day, if Jefferson has to be a decoy to win the football game, he said he's willing to do it. Winning is more important. And you know what? It stinks. You'd rather have Jefferson get 500 yards and 7 touchdowns every game, but you have to kind of cater to the defense to a point. And they did that by just torching them with Jones, Hawkinson, and Addison.
I think this goes back to a little bit from Kevin O'Connell's play calling standpoint to the Jacksonville game where Darnold threw 3 picks. And I think the reality is they know like Jefferson having big days is fine, but Jefferson's impact, Jefferson is paid what he's paid in part to have an impact on the game. And to go back to the top of this conversation, the most important part is he had a massive impact. Now, the fact that it doesn't show up statistically might certainly frustrate fantasy league players, and probably to a certain degree it frustrates Jefferson. Mm-hmm. But the reality is he is there to have that impact. And so now with TJ back as well, like don't sleep on that because Hawkinson's return is a huge, huge addition to what this offense can do and what Darnold can do and plays into what Darnold can do really well. So, some of this is a workaround and it's perfectly fine for, I think, what they saw from Darnold previously. And then, because the question is, you can't keep banging your head against the wall and be like, well, he's throwing more picks. There's nothing we can do. Actually, to O'Connell's credit, and I think there have been people complaining. I believe the last 2 games, he's called great games. I think O'Connell's dialed up great game plans. I don't care what the statistics say for one player. I care what the statistics say at the end of the day. And I feel like the Chicago game got sort of pigeonholed. Look, the special teams melted down. Okay. The return was inexcusable. The month thing was beyond that. But if you look, let's take the offense, Forno. Let's take what the offense did, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I thought for the last 2 games, but on Sunday, they had a spectacular day. Okay, you can get hung up on who did what and who didn't, but you know what? Hawkinson, great day. Addison had a fantastic day, and there's actually a case to be made that he maybe could have been in a position to have days like this previously, and it didn't take place. Mm-hmm. So I come away very hard-pressed to criticize Kevin O'Connell or anything that the offense did against the Bears defense and a Bears team, keep in mind, that is, I think, poorly coached, but they got some talent.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicago Bears are not a dumpster fire from a personnel standpoint. That would be a mistake to think that.
They have glaring holes, and I think they manifested themselves in the worst way at the worst possible times on Sunday. Well, but yeah, you're right. They have talent. They have players who can play ball. And I think they could have done a better job in some points to really fix this rebuild, but they're not in a terrible spot for whoever takes over the team for Matt Eberflus next year. To kind of go on the Addison point, and then guess what, guys? We have film to break down. Here's the thing with Addison. I know Addison's dad is going to go on social media and say, hey, my son's open. He needs more targets, those kinds of things. But here's the deal. I will never be that concerned with Addison's production, because if Addison is the second read on, let's say, pretty much every route concept, guess who's number one?
Right.
Justin Jefferson. And if Jefferson's open, it does not matter if Jordan Addison is open. None of that matters because the ball's going to Jefferson. So I will never be super concerned with the amount of production. When you are given the football, what are you doing with it? When the ball's coming your way, how are you utilizing that opportunity? How are you doing at catching the ball, taking it upfield? Are you maximizing those opportunities? That's what I want to see. If you're maximizing it, the production will come when it happens. None of the rest of it matters because Jefferson's that good. If he's open, he's getting the ball.
Right.
And Hawkinson too. Addison might be third on that list.
But that's the fine line. So if there is, and there definitely is, more development of Darnold, mm-hmm. I think what we saw Sunday is very important too. Because yes, you're right, but the thing too is being smart about it. When is Jefferson, because he's just so special, open? But when does his presence mean a guy is wide open, right? Mm-hmm. So I really think, because the 5 picks through 2 games against the Colts and Jags was somewhat concerning. It's okay, what's going on here a little bit? Mm-hmm. I think the last 2 games are a testament to O'Connell and Darnold. That thing on Sunday to me showed a development in, okay, I could force it to 18, but mm-hmm. I know that I'm still Sam Darnold, and some of that has been picked off, right? So mm-hmm. I love what I've seen. And then to your point, Hawkinson being back is just a plus, because you talk about a security blanket. TJ Hawkinson's a security blanket.
Oh yeah. So I'll kind of leave it at this, and then we'll go to the film, because I know we have a little bit of an expedited show here today. Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated does their power rankings, and every week I check them out and I kind of get a pulse of what national media thinks of the Vikings. He laid it out really, really well with Darnold, and I think it's something that we need to really focus on as far as how we're evaluating him. The first few games, there wasn't a lot of film. He balled out. Then they had film on him. Then they figured out, okay, here's what we need to do to stop him. Then he had some struggles.
Yep.
Now, as all good quarterbacks do, he's coming out on the other side of it because he's adapted to the adjustment. That's huge. This is not New York Jets Darnold. This is not Carolina Panthers Darnold. This is turning into a franchise quarterback. Flat out. Sam Darnold is turning into a franchise quarterback.
And well coached too.
Absolutely.
Don't forget that. If this dude goes to the wrong team now, I don't know that guy's still here. But I mean, we're talking about a team effort here. This is why this is the quarterback rehabilitation center of the National Football League in Egan.
It's also why I'm still leaving it as a non-zero chance Darnold's back next year. You whatever you think about JJ McCarthy, if you think he's the future, he's still an unknown commodity in the regular season of the National Football League. If Darnold is the franchise guy, it's going to be really hard to say no to that, because you believe he's a franchise guy right now. There's proof of it. There's proof of concept. It's non-zero. And I think just keep that in the back of your head. I still put it at 2 or 3%, but it's non-zero. And I think that matters.
A lot of credit and talked about much. but has been absolutely fantastic in his role. Number 11 there, Trent Sherfield.
Elite blocker,
Great on special teams. And here's the important thing. So when you're building up your free agent class in March, right? Or at sometimes to April, you're going out and fans are all excited. You sign one or two names or whatever. But the Trent Sherfields are small little transactions of, hey, the Vikings signed this guy. And you're like, who? And you might look him up. You might not. But the reality is you have success because of guys like that. And it's not, we don't even appreciate the plays and the blocks that they make. But Forno, as we both know, wide receivers, a lot of them do not enjoy blocking. Some of them purposely don't do it well, but the ones that do can last a long time because downfield blocking is a tough job. And Sherfield's been great. And guys like him to me are such important, they're not near the top of the 53, but they're in the middle of that thing when you're going through a roster, and they end up being so vitally important because they probably make, let's say, 3 to 5 plays per year that are absolutely essential that we never go back and appreciate. And
building the back end of your roster is arguably more important than building the front end of your roster because you're going to need stars, but it's the unsung guys, the Kamu Grugier-Hills who step in and force 2 turnovers when he's needed because Ivan Pace is out. He came in and played a solid game on Sunday. The David Questenberrys, who, look, you don't want him starting at left tackle, but guess what? He was fine. He was not a disaster. He had some plays where you're like, oh, Robinson and Darisaw make the play. Look, this offense misses Darisaw. There's no question about it. Correct. But he was good enough. And finding those guys and getting them in the right spots, they are why teams win championships. They are why executives hold on to jobs for so long. It's the back end of the roster. And I think Kwesi's done a great job. But we got one more thing we got to talk about here, Judd. And I don't think you and I have had this conversation yet.
Give me a second here because before we get to that conversation, I want to give a quick shout out to the exclusive personal injury law firm of Meat and Potatoes, Purple Daily. That, of course, is our friends at Nicolay Law. Nicolay Law knows that when you or a loved one gets injured, ordinary life can come to a stop and they can get complicated. During that time, insurance companies are likely to pressure you. They don't care if you get better. They don't care if your bills are piling up. And they don't care that you may not be able to work. But guess what? Nicolay Law, Russ right there walking through U.S. Bank Stadium, he cares. Nicolay has seen every play the insurance companies have, and they'll make sure you get the compensation you deserve after an accident. So if you've been injured, get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers. Get Nicolay. Start your path to winning at nicolaylaw.com or give them a call, 1-855-NICOLAY. That's 1-855-NICOLET. Russ right there going through the tunnel, just like the Vikings will be on Sunday against the Cardinals. All right, final topic. Forno, floor is yours.
Listen, if Jared Goff is going to be in the MVP candidate, Sam Darnold should be. And the stats are way closer than you might think. And to me, the only reason why Goff is an MVP candidate is because the Lions are darlings and there's preseason hype. What has Goff done that has elevated his team to a point where he's an MVP candidate? Like, point it out to me because I don't see it. The real MVPs are Ben Johnson, that offensive line, and that running game. And Goff is fantastic at operating an efficient offense, but he's not elevating it. His air yards per attempt are like 27th in the league at 6.6 yards. Darnold is slinging it 9 yards, air yards per attempt, meaning the ball travels an average of 9 yards past the line of scrimmage. Good for 4th in the National Football League. To me, it's very frustrating seeing the disrespect Darnold gets. I mean, if you watch that broadcast, it was bizarre. It was like their entire narrative was Caleb Williams is the up and coming. He is the Messiah. Yeah. And Darnold just exists and only because he's a 3rd overall pick from 2018. Darnold's turning into a franchise guy, and announcers nationally just don't want to admit it. They don't want to talk positively about him. They want to be right about their preconceived narratives, and it's bogus. Like, Jared Goff shouldn't be an MVP candidate. Quite frankly, I don't think Sam Darnold should be either. But if you're going to talk about Goff being an MVP candidate, you better talk about Darnold because the numbers and performance on field are arguably better.
Well, if that is your soapbox, then mine is this. Kevin O'Connell, Coach of the Year.
I think that one's going to be a little harder, but I'm not going to argue with you.
It's going to be.
Good candidates.
There are, but you tell me a guy who has taken a team where nothing was expected and a quarterback. Jim Harbaugh had Justin Herbert, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the teams that have Dan Quinn has a team that's now backsliding. And by the way, he's got the number 2 overall pick in the draft, who hadn't failed, where Sam was the 3rd pick. I think if you look at O'Connell's body of work here, I think his coaching resume, 2024, is the most impressive one. Mike Tomlin, Russell Wilson was still Russell Wilson at one time. And Pittsburgh's impressive. I'm not saying that O'Connell's it's an easy choice, but I'm saying that I've gone through the resumes, and I think what he has done from a play calling standpoint, from a quarterback rehab standpoint, from a team that had an over-under of 6.5 wins, that's my soapbox.
Yeah. Look, coach of the year's tough. It's.
Oh, God, yeah. No question.
I'll even further the point, while we're on the topic, let's say Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. How about he's GM of the year?
I have written about that multiple times. He should be executive of the year. But you know where it's going to go? Howie Roseman. Because Howie did it again. He traded a 3rd-round pick for a guy who barely plays.
Well, he signed Saquon. He's going to get credit for he's going to get credit for Barkley. And by the way, Joe Shane should be shown the door in New York.
Yeah.
That's my executive of the firing year. You know what? I'd fire Joe Shane on Thanksgiving. I'd call him up and say, "You ruined my year, so I'm going to ruin yours on Thanksgiving. You're a turkey. You're out."
The Vikings waived Nick Muse on his birthday. Shout out to his brother Tanner, who also got waived by the Raiders on his birthday.
No way.
One of the funniest coincidences of all time.
Oh, no.
Brothers being waived on their birthdays. Now, Nick was a procedural move. He's going to be on the practice squad by the end of day today, but just a wild coincidence.
Yeah. I will say this to both of your points. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has I think it's done now. Has the best ever free agent class in Vikings history. I think this free agent class is the best ever.
The only one you could really argue is maybe when they got the USFL guys in, Anthony Carter, Keith Millard.
But that was a different circumstance. I'm saying the true free agency. I think Plan B started at 92-ish. So with the advent of real free agency, I think now, Favre was great. It was sort of a weird thing, right? 2006, Childress's first class was good. Lieber, Chester Taylor, Tony Richardson, Ryan Longwell. I'm probably
Hutchinson, right?
Hutchinson was a great one. Yeah, thank you for. So that was a really good one. But this class, to me, the totality of it, the defense, Van Ginkel and Grenard, you got to be kidding me.
And then you trade up to draft a quarterback who then gets hurt in the preseason, having to kind of
you got Darnold,
the tragic stuff that has happened in the preseason leading up to filling those holes and just riding with the punches. I mean, he has fought so much adversity to have now at this point a 9-2 football team by his doing. I mean, it's incredible.
Fantastic stuff, boys. Thanks much. Happy Turkey Day. Enjoy 3 football games on Thanksgiving. There's nothing better than Thanksgiving football, and it's a great weekend too. Forno will be. My guess is you'll watch approximately 27 college games on Friday and Saturday, and then come back and watch a full slate on Sunday. But we'll be back next week. Cardinals and Vikings to break it down, meat and potatoes. We'll see you later.